I really wanted to express my appreciation for the opening stanzas of Norman Mailer's The Executioner Song from 1979. They call the Executioner Song essentially a novelization of real event, a true crime novel, or I guess you could say a nonfiction novel is the better way to say it. And I'll never forget when I first bought this book in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, for a very deep discount, maybe $5 or something, at a used bookstore. Someone was running out of their own living room near a laundromat close to campus. And this would have been in 1999, so roughly the 20th anniversary of this book's release. And I think one thing I was just struck with more than anything else is the incredibly simplistic language, which I thought was almost sophomoric when I first read it. But then I understood. After just a few sentences or a few paragraphs or 20 or 25 minutes worth of reading in this rather overcrowded laundromat there in Tuscaloosa, it occurred to me, I got it. This is writing. This is what happens when an author gets out of the way, when an author removes adverbs, when an author lets the events tell the story and removes language that would otherwise impede the story. And I've read, of course, a considerable amount about the Executioner Song, which, by the way, I believe won the Pulitzer Prize in '79 for Norman Mailer, who was in his 50s when he wrote it. But they say that he really changed gears, that he used to write what they used to call muscular sentences. But with this latest book that was about Gary Gilmore, that he found another gear. So what is the book about? Gary Gilmore was age 36 roughly, if I'm telling the story right, in April of '76, when he was released from jail for a good number of robberies and other crimes that he had committed. And if memory serves, he served 14 years. And the story is interesting. He was released to his family in Provo, Utah. And between April of '76 and July of '76, the book covers his exploits, including his relationship with a 19-year-old Nicole Baker, who herself was deeply troubled. There in July of '76, Gary ultimately commits 2 murders in the service of robbery and is sentenced to death in Utah. And among the things that makes his story interesting legally is he forced the hand of the legal system to actually carry out his own execution. And amazingly, even though he was just committed those crimes in the summer of '76, July of '76, he was executed in January of '77. So a rather unusual legal case. And by the way, the manner of execution was barbaric. It was a firing squad there in January of '77. And behind him, at the firing squad, were just mattresses to stop the bullets. It was a truly medieval sort of situation. But the story particularly is somewhat compelling. It's interesting to watch his exploits over the 3 months or so during the time that he was alive in Provo. It's a somewhat sympathetic rendering, but at the same time, there's a lot of, I guess you could say, I'm not sure what the word is, but seediness to the lives of these people. 36-year-old Gary and 19-year-old Nicole, who even at that stage had a very complex and involved personal life. And the manner in which they sort of fed off each other was, to some degree, I guess you could say, almost sad. But Norman Mailer has a talent. And the late Norman Mailer, I should say, died in 2008. I have never read, I think, a better book. I've never read one that just had a gift for grabbing the audience and letting the events tell the story in a manner of writing that appears to be so simplistic, but at the same time, you could argue is somewhat revolutionary. These opening paragraphs, this is the opening paragraph of chapter 1 of a very lengthy book, by the way, well over 1,000 pages. Brenda was 6 when she fell out of the apple tree. She climbed to the top and the limb with the good apples broke off. Gary caught her as the branch came scraping down. They were scared. The apple trees were their grandmother's best crop, and it was forbidden to climb in the orchard. She helped him drag away the tree limb, and they hoped no one would notice. And that was Brenda's earliest recollection of Gary. And there are no paragraphs in the book that are much more complex than that. It's just remarkable. It didn't occur to me what writing could do. It didn't occur to me how interesting it could be. It just didn't seem... I read a book by another very well-known author who shall remain nameless, who is sort of celebrated among intellectuals, and I was just stunned. It was just impenetrable. It was cloudy. It had a lot of sarcastic punctuation that was intended to depict accent. You never see any of that with this book. These short, choppy sentences have a way of telling a story like nothing else I've ever read. So I could hardly recommend this more. And I know I'm just giving you the briefest sample, but I'm a huge fan of this book particularly. To tell you the truth, I did try a couple other of Norman Mailer's books, but I didn't like it nearly as well. One was Oswald's Tale, that of course told the story of Lee Harvey Oswald. So anyway, the Executioner Song. And by the way, in 2018, I believe it was, they re-released the paperback version in large print. It's kind of an odd thing. They have these big spaces between the paragraph, and it's a rather thick book.